What's up, everybody? It's Alex from Heavy New York, and on the phone, we got Jared from Talking Book. Thank you so much for your time, man. Good to talk to you in the good old quarantine zone.
Yeah, it's amazing here.
Yeah, like you wouldn't believe. I'd imagine some good albums are going to come out of this, though.
Yeah, that's kind of the silver lining to all of this, is that artists get to kind of, if you have a space that you can work in at least,
Yeah.
and your studio is in your house or something like that, then yeah, you can definitely get a lot of work done. So, but having a child to take care of also at the same time kind of cuts into that a little bit, but it's been pretty productive, so it's been all right.
There you go. So,
All right.
the new album, Talking Book
Yeah.
2, scheduled to come out April 24th. The single Thermal Drift, which is the first single, is this almost kind of like a clear representation of like what the entire album is going to sound like, or do you think that this is just like, in a way, like the tip of the iceberg?
It doesn't. The beauty of it is it does not represent the entire record. That's the whole kind of slightly problematic part of picking one thing to sort of start with, because you sort of put it out there and then people are like, oh, this is what it's going to be, and then the next song is totally different. And so no, it's just part of this like arc of music within the record, where we go from these really melodic things into these really kind of darker, way more abstract zones, and then come back out into the clouds again with something melodic and dare say pretty, or just at least like epic sounding. But yeah, we just kind of went with the one that was kind of the easiest for someone to digest off the bat. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Well, I've always thought that with both the first record and this one, that like the music was fairly experimental. So really trying new things has never been like an issue for Talking Book, right?
No, not at all. And the thing is that so we played some shows now it's been about 7 years ago. We did a little tour in South America, and we wrote a bunch of music just for that tour. And a lot of it was way more melodic, and with more rhythmic structures and stuff like that. So we kind of naturally went that way. But the beauty of this record is that there's a lot of, it's so all over the map. Similar to like, I don't know, a lot of bands, even like Faith No More stuff, where they'll do a song that's really heavy, and the next song could be a ballad, or like an Evidence or something like that, where they just go from extremes. And so we kind of went that route in a way, but it's sort of all fairly abstract. But then we have moments of stuff like that where it's pretty melodic and easy.
Well, do you have like a preconceived idea for like how you want the album or how you want the song to sound, or is there like a lot of improvising involved?
Some of them came out of straight up improv sessions, and then we kind of took bits of that and I kind of put it together, and then maybe added something on top to glue it all. And then other parts, like that song, Thermal Drift, kind of started with this piano thing, the main, just like that comping thing that came from Bill, and then I sort of built on top of that the melodies, and then we added something else to it, like some samples that he had of like a Chinese orchestra or something like that, and that kind of like filled everything in. It's a very weird way we put this record together, but yeah, it kind of just happened organically, I'd say. But I didn't have I didn't go into it with like, okay, this is what I'm gonna write. It kind of like fell into that, I was like, oh, this kind of sounds like a Brian Eno kind of thing, and let's kind of stick with that,
Being that this is the first Talking Book record since 2011, I think the first one is when it came out, right?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Does this, can this conceptually just be like a follow-up to Talking Book 1, or is this kind of like, in a way, like a new start? This record kind of stands out a little bit more in the catalog?
It's a bit of a follow-up, but it kind of stands on its own. I think also having Dominic Cramp, he was on the first record, and now he's on this record, and he helped mix some of the songs too, so that it's a different thing. So yeah, I think it's a new start for us, and I feel like if we do a next one, it could be completely different from this one. So we're just going wherever we go and whatever we're into at the time. So
yeah, but it's not like just a complete departure from what people heard in the first one.
No, that's the thing. It's not completely. Yeah, no, it gets into the same kind of zones. A lot of like crunchy sounds and like mangled samples. Less, I would say on this one, less drones and sort of like ambient bliss, lushness, but definitely still stays within our sound for sure.
Definitely. Awesome. Kind of like going to the formation of Talking Book, because, you were in a lot of projects as well, such as Vulcan 68 and Vision Heat, and you had, Bill, who, of course, plays with Faith No More, was almost kind of like, did, like, your previous projects at all, like, influence how you wanted this to sound, or did you guys kind of want to do something that you never really did before?
Originally, it sounded a lot like two projects that I had already done. One was called, actually 3 projects. One was called, Volcano 68 was Dominic and myself, and then this project I did called Beaks Plinth, which was the real catalyst for Talking Book. Beaks Plinth originally was a side project where I have an old record player, the Talking Book record player. It's a record player designed for blind people to play records on so that they can listen to like a book on record. This was back in the day. So what they would do is they would probably record the record at a really high speed, and then or print the record at a really high speed, and then when you play it on a record player that plays at 8 1/3 RPM, you can then have like a very long side. You know what I mean? So like your audio on one side would be extremely long because you sped up and now you slowed it down. So if you take a 33 RPM record and put it on an 8 RPM, it's really extreme.
Wow.
So the whole idea behind Beaks Plinth at the time was to take like old Exotica records, let's say, put them on an 8, and then just kind of use just like basically the first 10 seconds of a song could be 3 minutes long, So, and I would cut everything up and just kind of loop like 1 or 2 things, whatever. Anyway, so then Bill and I would work together. He would help me mix some stuff, and one day we were sitting in his studio. He's like, "Oh, I really dig this. Like I think we can maybe, would you mind like messing around with this?" I was like, "Sure." And of course, that's sort of how it all started. Threw some guitar on top of it, helped me like EQ things or like put a bunch of reverb or delay on stuff. And I think at the time we were both looking for like maybe doing some soundtrack work. I think this was in between his Faith No More time, and he was maybe thinking about some other projects, and that's how it all began.
Yeah, I really got from especially listening to this album, because like when I was listening to like Blood Aurora or Early Sorrows or any of those, or Lost in Glass, it really did like create a sonic essence of imagery. And of course I could be just talking from my experience with it, but it almost seems like it has that sort of like soundtrack sort of vibe to it. Are you like, do you guys like watch like a lot of movies or like play video games or something like that?
No video games, but soundtrack music is probably the number one thing that I'm influenced by. Everything from like even the 80s work I do in Vision Heat, it's all soundtrack based for the most part. Pop soundtrack, but like I go deep. I just love soundtrack music because I've never been a singer and I don't like work with singers. So every time you do an instrumental, it just evokes soundtrack to me. So yeah, I think that's sort of it. And the whole feel of this new record is soundtrack, 100%. That's the covers, soundtrack influence, or not movie influenced. It's all soundtrack music. Yeah.
Have you ever heard of the soundtrack group Two Steps from Hell?
No, it's a group.
Yeah, it's Thomas Ferguson and Nick Phoenix, but their stuff is more like epic oriented. Like so, like for movies like 300 or like,
yeah.
That sort of Narnia feel to it. But if you want to hear some classical, I recommend.
Yeah, so like that's the thing that we kind of didn't want to do, and it's something that I respect all soundtrack. There's certain things that you start hearing a lot in soundtrack music, like the same sort of like feels that start coming up, the same kind of big drums. When you go in and you hear the trailer of a movie, it's like the loudest thing ever, and it's like a lot of crashing and big booms and bass and blah, blah, blah. We wanted to do something that was like, all right, let's do a soundtrack to something that's a little bit more obscure and a little more fucked up, and that's how I work anyway. Like, I'm sort of in that lo-fi, mid-fi sort of zone. So we wanted to just make something that didn't really sound like a current soundtrack, you know?
The best way
but not being too nostalgic.
Yeah.
Sorry.
The best way I was able to describe this, it's something like it could be a horror movie soundtrack or it could be a soundtrack to a rave. Like, it has both of those aspects to it, you know what I mean? At least from my experience.
Yeah, we were thinking, I think the whole time we were working on this was like, okay, soundtrack, but like to what? And like, and the whole thing was just like this weird sort of like, I don't know, like not putting a date on it, but like some kind of weird Serbian film or something from like the Eastern Bloc or something like that just was like, I don't know, it just had this feel to it, and we were kind of thinking about. And the color of the album cover, it's like a light blue, like a broken down castle. That's sort of what we kept imagining, like this king sort of in this castle kind of going crazy.
Yeah.
And he's a king of nothing, but he lives in this fucked up old castle. And we're like, okay, that was sort of the imagery behind it.
Yeah. And
so there's these epic spots, and then it dies down into these other spots, so like darkness, and then it comes back in. So, yeah.
Being that this is so soundtrack inspired, do you recommend that a listener were to like listen to this album chronologically? So they start off with Blood Aurora and end with Absent Horizon, or can listeners like approach it from any angle on the shuffle setting?
So there's to me, there's two ways of doing it. Each side, the whole thing is seamless. There's no like, there's a lull, but it's pretty much like the whole thing flows into the next. So I would listen to it as side to side. So I don't have the songs in front of me, but the first 20 minutes and then the next 20 minutes.
Okay.
At the same time, I kind of like putting things on shuffle and just hearing whatever happens. So I think it's one of those records you can sit and listen to and then kind of zone out. Like maybe you miss a couple minutes here or there and you come back and you're like, oh, where am I now? And like all of a sudden it's acoustic guitars and flowery, and then it goes back into dark. You know, it's like you just kind of come back to things.
Yeah. Well, I feel like, you know,
yeah.
You were saying?
No. That's kind of the feel that I like to listen to stuff.
Okay. Yeah, because I feel
zone out and then you kind of come back.
Yeah, I feel like that. You know, I've listened to this album now for maybe a good like 4 times now, and I'm still discovering new stuff on it, despite knowing what song is coming next. So I feel like that there's a lot of narrative, and that could be incorporated in here.
Yes, I love music that you kind of like discover something new every time you listen to it. I mean, you know, it's cliche to say, but I really do. Like, oh, I never noticed there was that little thing just kind of circling in the back, or like, you know, oh, I never listened to this song. It's kind of cool. You know, I don't know. I like records that make you kind of have to dig in and listen to it, like a little harder than others, but that's me.
Yeah. Do you think the fact that this album is like obviously like instrumental and more like environmentally driven, that it's also more open to interpretation, or are you maybe trying to get the listener to have a certain experience?
Both. Like, for me, I like the fact that you can sort of put your own thing on it, and then just be like, oh, because people always like, oh, this sounds like this. And I'm like, wow, I wasn't thinking that at all. And then you get people who, you know, and it's like interesting to hear how people interpret it. And then also, I like that people can choose whatever they want to, how they want to hear it. I don't. Mm-hmm. Is that your question? Sorry.
No, definitely. Yeah. And here, you ready for the most difficult question of the interview?
I love them.
All right. So you have a song like A Crumbling Mind Smiles, but then you have a longer song like The Land Upright. You have a song like Dying Light that's a minute, and then you have a song like Absent Horizon, 2.5 minutes. How do you know when a song is done?
Oh, that's a good question. I personally, like, I love really short songs. I rarely write songs that are more than like 4 or 5 minutes, but the Crumbling Mind song, in a way, is like 2 songs in one. So I kind of like put that together. You know what I'm saying? Like, it wasn't just one long song. It's like you got the whole front end, and then it kind of goes into that whole like kind of like counterpoint guitar keyboard thing at the end. It's like a separate song that I just kind of put together. I don't design. I don't know when a song's done, when I'm like, okay, like I listened to it enough and I'm like, at the 3-minute mark, I'm like, okay, I'm bored now. and so I cut something out, or like I trim it or something like that, you know. Okay. And I think about the listener, like, do we want to hear another verse of this again, or do we want to just like cut to the chase and like move on to the next thing? Yeah. And I'm also I got 40 minutes to make a record, and sometimes I'm like, well, how much can I fit into 40 minutes without being too ADD, you know? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's sort of how I do it. And because we knew we were going to put it on vinyl, we wanted to limit it to 40 minutes. So we had to kind of like think about that. Okay, well, do we want this to be like 8 minutes, or do we want to sort of trim this and then throw that cool little thing that's like only a minute and a half and kind of throw it in there?
Yeah.
So people can hear it because we like it.
Yeah. I like it. You think both artistically and economical at the same time.
You do. I mean, the thing is like I don't have that much opportunity to just put out records whenever I want, you know, especially on vinyl. It's very it's costly, and it takes a lot of effort. But now, of course, when you have Bandcamp, you can kind of do whatever you want. So now we have all these other tracks. So what we're thinking is, once the record comes out, then we can start throwing bonus stuff out there for download only or something, and then we can get really like, fuck it, like let's throw that 10-minute thing on there.
Yeah.
But for the record, I kind of want it to be like, yeah.
Well, are you ever also worried like the song you leave off the record will be a B-side and just be the biggest hit you guys ever had?
Yeah, there's one that I think would be there's something I wrote with these guys that I thought was going to be like, oh, this will be the one and then everyone was like, nah, it doesn't really work. I was like, all right, but we'll figure it out, because it is good, and I think it would. But yeah, there's a lot. We have a couple songs like that where we're like, this is good, but we didn't. The thing is, with this record, we had like multiple mixes of, like, let's say one song maybe had 4 or 5 different mixes and versions, and I was like, it was tough to be like, all right, let's go with this one, because this. But then you go back a couple of days, or you're like, damn, now this one was actually kind of cool. But I think this is because you get bored of the one you've heard so many times and spent so much time mixing, and then you hear the old one again, you're like, fuck, I kind of like that one. So it's like, yeah. So,
yeah. And do you have time for one more question?
Yeah.
The final question I wanted to ask you is, because you obviously bring this material live, and you mentioned that like even for your South American tour, like you even had extra songs just dedicated to that tour. So when it comes to playing live, is there maybe a similar energy into playing live as there is when you're songwriting, or being that you have very atmospheric music, you kind of have to like adjust to the room that you're in and stage and everything like that?
This was one of the reasons why we wanted to write songs that were a little different this time, because our experiences before, and maybe it was the bookings so we were playing some places that were like kind of like loud, like clubs and bars, which really doesn't work for like really quiet, dynamic instrumental music, because you're trying to get quiet and all of a sudden you hear clinking of like bar glasses and people talking, and then so you had to write something. So we decided, like, let's write, for whatever experience, we're like, let's write something that's heavier, like more drums, more just heavier shit happening, so that we can, when we play those venues again, we can drown out some of that sound. So in my thinking, when I was first designing the next, or architecting the next record, I was thinking like heavier and bigger.
Yeah, definitely.
So, but we did play some like quieter theaters and stuff, and that was amazing, because you couldn't hear a pin drop, and it was like perfect.
Yeah.
But it's rare you're going to get an audience in a bar that's just going to stand there for 45 minutes, like listening to every note you're playing, and so
you'd be amazed if you come to St. Vitus in Brooklyn what you would witness, though.
In a good way, you mean?
Yeah, in a really good way.
Okay, so places like New York and spots in Europe and stuff like that, totally different listening environment, and listener. In Chile and Argentina, it's just different. They're not used to that kind of feel in a live setting. I don't think it's that often they hear that, and so that would be amazing if we can play places like that. It'd be awesome.
Yeah, please do.
Trying.
So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed this discussion. Is there just anything like in terms of live shows that aren't at the risk of getting canceled at the moment that you'd like to promote, or anything else?
No, there's nothing yet booked for any of my projects, including this one. Bill has some Faith No More activities planned for this summer, so we'll see how that goes. Probably after that, we'll start like thinking about how we're going to do this live, if we're going to do it live. So we'll see.
Awesome. Please come to New York City if you play live.
I would love to.
Yeah, awesome.
Very much so.
But thank you so
Cool,
much.
man. Well, thanks for calling.
Of course. Everybody, we are here with Talking Book. Talking Book 2, out April 24th. Be sure to pick that up. This is Alex from Heavy New York. We will see you next time.